We made it!
Congratulations, Kalle!
Thank you so much!
That's only an A and a P.
That's it.
That's burning.
Even kijken, zo dat je nog... Well...
It's a homage to Audemars Piguet.
It's a bit sad. And there we go. Well, all of you, thank you so much for joining. My name is Kalle Slaap, watchmaker in the Netherlands, and we are celebrating 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. So, with me is Wilco Terwijn.
Hi.
He's a Dutch comedian,
Yes.
stand-up comedian. He writes comedy for other comedians.
Yeah, and TV, that sort of stuff. But I'm not here to do comedy. I'm here to talk watches. So.
And hairstyles, maybe.
Yeah, now we have the same hairdresser. If we put our heads together, we can make an ass out of ourselves.
That's it. Wilco is enthusiast of vintage watches and works on watches himself.
Yes, and that's all because of you, basically.
Aha, yeah.
I'm a watch enthusiast, and I followed the course, Kalle's course.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of dabbling with repairing watches, and sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's highly frustrating.
Well, cheers everybody.
Cheers,
we've
Kalle.
got new mocks. There we go.
It's almost a late night show.
It is. Well, there we go. Cheers everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I thought, well, let's do a celebration today, but a celebration for vintage watches as well. And there are so incredibly many channels which focus on high-end Patek, Audemars Piguet, Vacheron. Well, I'm guilty of that as well. Some of the time, but I thought, well, Wilco is a real enthusiast, and we're going to show you vintage watches without breaking the bank, just because they're fun, they're appealing,
Yeah.
and Wilco has brought just a bit of his collection and going to tell us a bit more about it.
Well, I just because Kalle asked me to bring some stuff that's not that expensive, so I basically set myself up for some highly highly ferocious comments. And yeah, it's so in my head I just had like, let's keep it under 250 euros.
Yeah.
That's easily doable for almost anybody, because nowadays most of the Instagram stuff is basically flexing with huge watches.
We started a year and a half on YouTube. We've been streaming for 5 years. So for 5 years, 2017, I started on Twitch. A year and a half on YouTube. And we thought, well, it's a niche. Just like we discussed right now. We talk about the inside of a watch, technical stuff. Who is going to like that? So if you get 1,000 subscribers and enthusiasts, I'll be more than happy. And we like the streaming and the exchange of knowledge, because that's what I like about the live stream. It is an exchange of knowledge. It's just not me pouring out stuff, but it's in a discussion with you all, with the viewers. And now within a year and a half, 10,000 subscribers is simply insane. So thank you all so much for your support, and yeah, for liking this stream, and hopefully the fun we are having, and well, helping to develop a bit more amateur, part-time watchmakers, maybe professional watchmakers, because the world really does need them.
This is a very simple late 50s, I think, late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah.
Girard-Perregaux, Gyromatic, very nice dial. There's a bit of scratching on the glass, but that's because I lock my bike and then you scratch it. It's Amsterdam, so it's always bikes and locks, and you always scratch your glass. and it's just a beautiful little watch. It runs fine, and it's one of those things that's, I think that's a perfect watch for instance, under a suit as a dress watch. I personally like the smaller sizes, like 34, 35, 36, 37. In the States they go really big, like 41. I wonder what the viewers like for sizes. What's your, if you have your favorite size and why? Because I have a sort of middle of the road wrist. It's not big, it's not small, but I really like 36, 34 millimeters. And this is the only one that's not 200. That's a little bit more, but not that much more. It's probably well known in the group. It's a Universal Geneve Polerouter. And it's one of the first ones. So it's the 138 SS.
It is
with a bumper movement. It's a bumper automatic, so it's not that the micro rotor.
Yeah, and that is Genta, right?
This is the Polerouter is designed by Gerald Genta.
Wow.
This was also actually quite cheap for. I do want to replace the second. I think it's a little bit too short, or it's black, and it's
black. Yeah,
and it sort of looks shorter than it is.
True.
And I need a crown. The crown is not original.
Yeah.
And that's horrible to find.
Yeah. These hands shouldn't be with lume, right?
There's so many configurations of the Polerouter that it's. I hope there's someone in the comments who has more knowledge of this than me, because it's. I tried to do as much research as I could, but there's an infinite number of configurations with dials, with loom plots, with little texts, Swiss made. It's
a jungle out there.
Yeah, it's very hard, but I just like the look of it.
It's beautiful,
and I love this sort of watches, and it's got the crosshair dial, and I love crosshair dials.
Oh yeah, Hakan Vintage Radium is really dangerous. It really is. In my previous life, in the mid-90s, I was a bomber, and that means I made X-rays of welding offshore, huge pipes. So I am, sounds ridiculous, but I've got the papers for radiation specialist.
That explains the hair.
Oh, true.
Don't get him mad. You won't like it when
and Back to the Future. But yeah, I got my radiation specialist papers because of that job in the mid-90s. And I did some investigating with a Geiger counter and radium hands. And ever since that day, the radium hands are in a metal container in a different safe because it is incredibly radioactive. Alpha radiation, which doesn't penetrate rice paper for cigarettes, but if you got a cut in your hand, open wound, and alpha radiation particles get in, it's hugely well, bad for your health. And there's some in the radium, some gamma radiation, which goes just straight through you, and still not too good for your health. So yeah, be very careful with the old.
The most horrible story is those radium girls.
The radium girls.
They used to loom the hands and the dials.
Yeah.
And they work with really small brushes, and to keep them keep the tip nice and clean and very tight to make those fine lines, they used to lick it. So they would dip it in radium and lick it, and then all of a sudden they had no jaw anymore.
True.
It's just a horror story, truly.
In the book and the film, they painted their nails for at night, and just for fun, but yeah, it was.
And there's also one of those famous X-rays where a guy got his wrist broken or something, and then you just see the loom plots below on his bones.
Excellent.
So be a little bit careful with opening it up and breathing it in, that sort of stuff. That's because once it enters the body, it's really bad for you. I think this is one of my best finds, I think. This is also, again, under 250 euros. And it's got the original crown. It's got a strange, awkward little casing that's quite original. You don't see it much. And it's an Omega. And it's also a... one of those crosshair dials.
Crosshair dials,
and you see a honeycomb dial. So this is like a very, very, very nice watch, I think.
It is.
And if you just compare that for, you know that there's people buying Daniel Wellingtons or Finchero or Filippo Loriatti for this sort of prices, and I'm like, why would you do that if you can sort of get this sort of stuff?
True.
It is a find, so it does. You cannot see like 20 of them all over the place.
But even on Chrono 24, there are plenty of smaller watches for 200, 300, 400 euros.
Yeah, but this is not that small. It looks quite big on the wrist.
This one I would like to show you. It just came in today.
Oh, yeah.
By a very special client. He just had a very emotional time, and we had such a nice conversation today. And he gave me this and to show you, and I think it's real fun, because when we talk about vintage watches, here is the Rollomatic. The setting isn't working, but
it's a Super Datumatic.
It's a Super Datumatic.
Is that a BFF movement? So the Baumgart movement?
A Baumgart, yeah.
That could be, because those Super Datumatics, they have them in another brand as well. It's... I've seen them before.
But like here, 25 jewels for a hand-wound movement, it is a lot. So, impressive. But as we go on, the more a dial tries to sell itself, the more you think, So it's a Rollomatic, 25 joules waterproof. Super Datumatic, not just a Datumatic, this one is the Super Datumatic. Unbreakable mainspring, shock-proof and anti-magnetic. Well, I thought, time to have a look at the movement.
This must be the next best thing since sliced bread.
Why doesn't anybody have a watch like this on their wrist?
It's so funny. Normally I watch the stream at Twitch and you see only one part of the comments, but there's so many more comments now.
It's because we're multi-platform on YouTube, Facebook and Twitch.
Rob Koning's got a Fusée too. That's another one. Jean-Claude Leclerc, that's funny. Open a bottle of wine and see what happens. You get drunk. No rocket science needed. Funny.
Jean-Claude is polishing all night, so he doesn't have any time to do the wine. Heel erg leuk dat je erbij bent,
Matt
Jean-Claude.
Burley has a question. I have a Uraka chronograph, but can't find any info. Yeah, sometimes you just get those brands that you never ever heard of, and it's especially the 50s and 60s. They're just brands that are completely unknown, and it's incredibly hard to find any decent sort of info on it. Usually what I do is just open them up and see what kind of movement there's in there, and And that usually tells you a lot. But brand-wise, sometimes it's just a brand that's been like tried out for a year and then it's gone again, and it's never ever. And the funny thing is, there's so many of those brands, and I might have. I'll get into that a little bit later.
Sure, I'll show you the movement first, because remember the 25 joules. Well, they weren't lying. Boom, boom, boom. Look. It is, well, you don't have to be a watchmaker. It's the cheapest of the cheapest movement. And look at this. They filled this all with jewels, because the barrel just moves about, and now it's sliding over all those jewels. It's insane. But then again,
this is even worse than one of those
Baumgartners. It's a pin lever movement. It's horrible, but it has got 25 joules. True.
Yeah, that's like me saying I got a six-pack underneath a layer of
baby fat. If we get students here, and they say, well, I've worked on top brands, you make so much more an impression here if you work on cheap ass crap stuff and make that run perfect, because then you are watchmaking, and if you just clean it, put it back together, and it works, yeah, sure.
Then you're sort of a housekeeper. No, it's fun, because those little brands we were talking about, 50s, 60s, there's so many brands that I found out that there's actually a lot of names that were just brands. Like a friend of mine is called Guido, and I found that Guido was a watch brand in the 60s. So I sniped one, completely refurbished it, got it running really well, and gave it as a gift. And people go like insane, go like, hey, that's a watch with my name on it. It's like, of course, if your name is Richard Mille, or Senor Rolex, then it's easy. And then I found out that Ajax is also a watch brand, and in Sweden they had a brand called Ajax. So now I'm occasionally trying to get Ajax watches here. I'm making one for a friend of mine who's also a big Ajax fan, and this is the one I found.
How did they perform last weekend?
Better, not as well as this watch.
They lost from PSV. And that's the only thing. That's the only thing I know about soccer.
And it's a very small watch, but I kind of like it because it's got those Breguet numerals. They got Breguet hands. Yeah. And it's just if you see that, or you show that to another Ajax supporter, they go mental. They go like, how? What is this? How did you get it? Yeah, it's really nice. And this one is probably going to Jasper Leifering from Amsterdam Vintage Watch, who's also a big Ajax fan. But I'm first sniping another one for myself before I give this one away.
Is this called after the dishwasher stuff or the fire extinguishers?
No, the Greek god, of course. It's not a god, it's a hero. But I kind of like this sort of
course.
Stuff. And especially if you know a friend of yours is fan of a club like that, then it's
and it doesn't have to break the bank.
Oh, this is like 5 or 6 euros. Yeah? Yeah, it was like in a I got it in a basket of 10 old watches for like 50 euros or something. So it's absolutely no money.
So if it was named after a proper soccer club, it probably would be more valuable.
Like Midtjylland or something. Or Data.
But is it time to show the Angelus?
Oh yeah, that's a nice one. It's quite recent. I absolutely love this one.
It is so nice.
I've never seen one like it. Never.
Nottingham Forest. Ah. Let me see. Even without knowledge of watchmaking or what movement is it, what period is it, forget all that. I think it's just an amazing looking watch. A bit foggy, but
The camera has been drinking too.
I think the dial is amazing. It is an Angelus.
Actually, that's a very good brand, Angelus. It's very unknown, but very good brand. Like you said earlier, they made movements for Panerai.
For the 8 hour, the 8 day movements.
Yeah, they made great chronographs in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s. They actually made that's a funny one. They made probably the worst named watch in the world. They had a sort of cricket, like Vulcain has a cricket.
Angelus made an alarm.
They made an alarm clock, and it was called the Tinkler.
The Tinkler. I want one right now.
So there are very few have been sold of that.
Tinkle.
What's that on your wrist? It's my pee alarm watch. I got a bladder problem. I need this Tinkler for medical reasons. But that would be probably the worst, probably the worst meeting, like creative meeting.
Yeah.
How do we call this watch? We have a new alarm watch. What shall we call it, guys?
Something butch, something serious, something. Well.
Gunther has an idea. We call it the Tinkler.